Silicon City is an absolutely engrossing game that takes me back to the 90s era of city builders, which is exactly what it sets out to do. Now, the game's in early access. This is a review of 0.34 at the moment on the 5th of December. There's going to be more things added to this game as it goes along, but so much of the base is here already. I feel quite confident in giving a detailed review on what happens in this game and who it's for, because what I feel like this game is for people who are new to city builders or people who yearn for the more simplistic times of city builders from the 90s era. And what I'm thinking of is SimCity 2000, but reduced down in difficulty and complexity. That's really who this game is for. If you go in thinking I want to tweak and play around with absolutely everything in City Skylines and put in all the mods and go absolutely nuts, I don't think this game will quite scratch your itch. But there is some hidden depth here if you want it. But if you choose to ignore it, it's not going to break the game and your city is not going to fail as a result. Silicon City gives you all of the bases of what you normally get in a city builder game, but pared down in complexity. So, for example, you can put in electricity, and so long as it's connected to a road, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to put in power lines unless you've put something well off to the side of your map. And there's no playing around with, say, like water or gas or anything like that. And in terms of transport, it's just cars and on foot. There's no trains necessarily. It's all very basic and pared down. And the idea is that it brings back the grid-based system of you being able to zone everything as you go. The initial story scenarios paint this picture really well, and each scenario introduces a new part of Silicon City's mechanics to you. So at first it introduces electricity and roads, essentially, because as long as something is touching a road, it's fine. But then it allows you to zone things out into, at the very beginning of the game, you'll have homes, farming, and culinary. But you can choose how big or small those zones are, and so long as there's a road kind of going round it, you're okay. Houses and shops can be built up in the middle of it, and people will quite happily wander around, walking around there as if it's just a normal pavement. Not everything needs to be connected to a road, and I quite like that as a shortcut to simplicity. Then after that, it will start to introduce some of the other mechanics that you've got. And the two big chunky things here for Silicon City that you should be paying attention to are the length of someone's commute and the land value of their property. Almost everything in Silicon Valley boils down to these two traits, because if it's a long commute, then they're unhappy, and then they're not happy and they won't pay their rent. And if their land value is too high or too low, then they won't be able to get the jobs or pay the rent for whatever it is that they're doing. Now, let's take the first one of commuting up and running. So you get to paint off your roads wherever it is that you go, and things update pretty much in real time as you put down those roads and people choose the best commute that they need to get to wherever it is that they're going. However, because your cities are normally quite small, loads of people want to go around on foot. And so what I found one of the most powerful things in this game is understanding where to put in pedestrian crossings. And so if you get that right, and you're not putting them slap bang on top of loads of like junctions and traffic lights and so on and so forth, your traffic will flow quite nicely, but the amount of pedestrians will increase because they'll find that they can quite easily walk somewhere just as much as they do getting a car. There's no like big public transport going on here and being able to drill down into all of those details, at least not yet anyway. So it's all about those cars and those people and seeing what they do as they wander around. Every single person in Silicon Valley can be clicked onto so that you can see where their commute is. And if it's long and extensive, they won't be happy and they will tell you about it. And you can find out all about them because every person in your city is also on this kind of pretend Twitter. And so are you. So you can actually tweet out any kind of garbage you want to your followers. They don't reply or do anything. And you can also reply to them saying, my commute's long. And you can reply back, we'll get better shoes, moose. And that's perfectly fine. Nothing seems to happen from it, but I found it quite cathartic to tell people to shut up when they were complaining about having their house next to a factory, for example. Now, As you start to see all of this data kind of pulling out in front of you, and you can switch between the different views that are on the bottom right hand corner, this all kind of really plays into a where are people going, what roads do I need to change up, do I need to put in some more pedestrian crossings so that people can cross easier and get around quicker. And that really plays out very nicely. And one of the big things with Silicon City that I really love is the way how it visualizes this data in a way that gives you everything in front of you in your eyes without having to kind of really go in and dig deep and find it. And they've really nailed that, actually, I feel. The other thing that you can do with this as well is that you can click on individual buildings as you start building them up and see who's got jobs in there, for example, and then you can click on them and see what their rent is, how much their salary is, whether they're happy or not. And this all piles through into a ginormous city census that allows you to really start drilling down into who's in this zone, what do they do, where are they coming from? Have they got a good commute? Are they happy or not? And you can really visualize this up and down to your heart's content. But so long as you just are playing the game and enjoying yourself, and you're putting a little bit of zoning in everywhere, and you're being quite balanced with everything, the city will quite happily build itself and run itself without veering too far off the beaten path, so long as you control your finances and your government services. Government services start to come in once you hit over 500 people in your town, I think it was, because your town levels up as you hit certain population thresholds. And this gives you access to, first of all, a clinic, and then later on hospitals. It also gives you a police station, and most crucially for this game, a fire station. Now, you don't directly control any of these. They will go and react to whatever's going on around you, but you can choose to turn on or off a breaking news TV news flash so that when something catches fire, you can then look at it. And you need to make sure that you've got enough of those services up and running and that you've budgeted enough of your time for it. Enough of your finances for it so that the jobs are filled, people are on the job at the time when the fire kicks off, and that they can get to it as quick as possible. Again, coming back to that whole road layout and commuter thing, because if you don't have enough police or especially fire in this game dotted around your city in a way that means that they get to it quick, fires spread quickly in this game, and it won't be long before your entire zoned block is wiped out and wiped clean, and you'll have to rezone it again from scratch and let people start building back in again from scratch. And that's really where the damage from Silicon City can come from, and it's purely from the fire perspective. I ran into very little problems elsewhere in terms of difficulty, but fire is definitely a thing with this game. Another interesting thing that Silicon City does is it brigades finances into a day and night cycle. Every 24 hours in this game is actually a calendar month in the game too. And at midnight, you collect all of the taxes from your residential, commercial and industrial units. And then you've got that to run with for the next 24 hours. But out of that also comes initially bang on midnight, anything that you're paying for upkeep of like city halls, parks, skateboarding parks, swimming pools, your football stadium, whatever it is that you've got that you're paying out for government employees, it will all come out at the beginning at midnight. And so you can see that going on in the top of your screen. You'll know roughly what you'll get, but then you'll need to manage that money all the way through until your next paycheck. And so if you do kind of overspend, you can go to the bank and get an extra loan, but then of course you're going to be paying that back over X amount of months as well. So you just kind of need to really plan ahead with your finances. Didn't run particularly into many problems, but then I was playing on normal mode and easy mode for a lot of what I was doing, because what actually was changing with that is your starting money, and it takes a little while for people to actually trust to move into your town when you build it. And you can build out any maps from random generated seeds as you go along, kind of deciding how much of the terrain is bumpy, whether it's desert or grass, whether you're on an island or not too. Talking of those government jobs, you can decide individually exactly what budget you're going to give to all of these government departments. It's on a sliding scale from 0 to 100%, but going for 100% does give a lot of extra nice jobs to your economy, which means that people are happier because then they can pay their rent and they're not homeless. And this seemed to be where all of my unhappy people came from, was when they'd either arrived into the city and were completely homeless, or they had had their rent rise up from high property value, but they didn't have a high paying job to match. Quite often the government jobs are some of the best paid ones in this game. So my city started off initially heavily influenced by farming, but over time as your city levels up, you get access to new zones such as factory, office, shops and businesses. And these have better paying jobs as you go along. So you'll want to kind of balance that up. You'll also get access to apartments, which is where you can do like the densely populated home section as well. Although please don't let those burn down because that ruins your population very quickly. And so as you're doing all of this different land has various different property prices. The way how you boost all of this is by prettying up your city, because if you put something that's generating electricity like wind turbines or factories and industrial zoning next to houses, they lower down the property value and therefore the happiness of people in general as well. So what you'll be doing is putting in little parks, trees, and then bespoke buildings that you get sent to for gifts. Tennis courts, swimming pools, those types of things, and like city halls and libraries. All of these things boost up property value as you place them down. And so what you'll be doing is doing that to raise the property value, which then makes people feel happier. It then means that more people that want to come in from an office perspective and a shops and gifts perspective, and you get that high-end clientele in, which then pays those extra jobs. So it's quite cyclical in the way how it works, and it's relatively well balanced, I found. But you don't have to play in with all of this nuance and detail. If you just want to zone things out and have good fun with that, Silicon City will still quite happily run itself. Again, it comes back to that detail is there if you want it, but if you just want to revert back to 90s nostalgia of easy SimCity 2000, that is all here too. So you can take it to whatever degree of difficulty you'd like. So currently in this early access build, there are 3 different modes of graphics that you can look at too. I stuck mainly with the new kind of 3D graphics because I think the game looks absolutely beautiful. But what I absolutely loved is that you can go back to 90s isometric view, and it's rotatable, which slightly confused me because it was like rotoscoping it round. But I really like the 90s isometric view. And there's an 80s view where it's just top down. Now, I didn't like this so much, although it did remind me a little bit of those traffic mats that you used to get as a kid with your little toys on that you could then ride around on. But I appreciate that it's there. But personally, I'd spend most of my time either in the 90s isometric view, but really actually in the modern day graphic view, because that was how I could see and visualize all of my data in the best possible way. Talking of data though, and menus, I did run into some bugs and interesting quirks with this game, and they all centred around menus wanting to randomly pop up for no particular reason. I would be sitting working out like where to put down a road, or I'd be looking at a certain type of slicer of information, and then a building that I'd clicked on a little while ago, its menu would just appear from nowhere, and then suddenly a person's menu would appear from nowhere, and it was constant all the time, randomly throwing stuff up at me, and I was like, stop it, stop it, stop it. And it seemed to be a bug that I've seen other people comment on as well. But it was just interesting that sometimes menus just wouldn't pop up for you and you'd have to like click 3 or 4 times, whereas other menus were just rapidly appearing constantly all the time, even though I didn't click on it. My other problem centred around my emergency services. I would find that sometimes my clinic and my fire station just wouldn't bother to go out to people, and that used to catch things on fire. It specifically and cause problems with that, and then I'd lose a whole zone from it, and then eventually like the fire engine would pop out and I'd be like, that's way too late, mate. And there's no way to you get notified of the fire, but there's no way for you to then dive in and then say, right, fire engine, you've got 4 people working there, send an engine out. It will sit there for like 6 hours in game, and then it will go, no, I'm off and away. And that just feels like it should be tightened up a little bit, because I was losing sections of my city through what felt like no fault of my own, because I didn't have direct control over my emergency services to send them out wherever I needed to. And that kind of brings me on to my final point with Silicon City, which is I'm slightly concerned that the city basically starts to run itself if you're competent. And that's fine, but after you hit level 5, which is when your city hits 2,000 followers, I was thinking, right, I'm getting new buildings that just add on more capacity for things. So I'd got the hospital instead of the clinic. I was getting schools instead of libraries and stuff like that. And it was just doing the same thing but more in more capacity. And I was starting to think, so where does this game go if you keep leveling up your city? At what point does it introduce some more mechanics going on? And so it felt like it had hit its end game quite early on in the city building thing, and then it's relying on the just make it bigger, do it more, and making sure that things don't fall over. Now I'm sure that this will be addressed as more and more mechanics get put into the game later on down the line, and there's more to juggle, so therefore it makes more sense to level up. But at the moment it did feel a little bit like not that it was aimless or pointless, but it was relying on that hook of I want to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, rather than giving more variety to add on more layers of complexity to the game. Which I guess takes me full circle in saying that this is a great game for the introduction to city builder games, or people who long for that nostalgia of a relatively simplistic view of a city builder game from your SimCity 2000s and that ilk. Because if you put this up against City Skylines, for example, City Skyline dwarfs this game in terms of complexity, but this is pitched in a way that just makes you get something up and running really simply and quickly. And in just a couple of hours, I had a city that had thousands of people in, bustling around, and I was really proud of seeing it kind of expand and grow in front of my eyes, and I found that really actually quite satisfying. So it's got the core mechanics of a city builder really well done and nailed down. I'd just like to see some more variety in some of the other things that it brings to the table, and for that to be nicely put into the fold of what makes Silicon City a good game to play. So I hope that was informative. A written review will be over on higherplayinggames.com. Not immediately. I'm going to leave it a little while to see what the next couple of updates are before I do the written review. But if you've got any questions or anything like that, please do drop them down below, because I'm going to be diving in and out of this game for quite a while, and I'll probably do an update video later on down the track. So yeah, take care. Bye-bye. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.